Hello, welcome to another of the Good Projects professional development sessions in our series of core concepts. Today we're going to be covering the idea of mentors and role models. So just as a recap of where we've been so far in this professional development series, we've first looked at good work and how we define it, including the 3 E's of excellence, ethics, and engagement. We next looked at the idea of values and how they might influence our decisions in our work, and we looked at responsibility and the rings of responsibility framework. Today, we're going to bring this to the idea of mentors and role models and think about how the people around us can influence the work and the idea of good work that we do. What is a role model and what is a mentor? So, a role model, how we would define this, would be someone who you seek to imitate based on their qualities or actions, whereas a mentor is maybe someone who is usually known to you personally and who might advise or counsel you. So, a role model often can be somebody who you know as a mentor. There's some overlap between these two terms, but generally, a role model could be someone who you imitate from afar as well, based on particular qualities that you enjoy about that person or who you seek to be like in some way. A mentor is often someone who you're interacting with and who might be often wiser than you in a particular field or dimension and who can provide some guidance to you. For example, I wanted to pull this particular student response about role models and mentors. So this is taken from some student work that we collected from the study that you all are taking part in if you're watching this as part of our community of practice in 2024. And this student wrote, "My role model or mentor is my mom and Lionel Messi. They have qualities that are good and important for good work. What I would like to take from Messi is his perseverance. He still persevered through hard times and is now at the pinnacle of the football world. The quality I want to take from my mom is hardworking. She always works hard to ensure that the family and us children are happy." So I thought this was a good example of a student talking about two real world people who they think of either as a role model or a mentor. Maybe Lionel Messi being someone who we would think of more as a role model. There's this idea of perseverance that they're taking from Lionel Messi, something they seek to emulate. The mom can also be a role model through this idea of hardworking, but maybe she's also a mentor because the student is interacting with their mother personally as well. So, keeping in mind a few different things when identifying role models and mentors, I wanted to go over these 3 ideas. So, these can help you in identifying role models and mentors and also help your learners. So, the first is that you can pull from a variety of relationships and experiences. We all have numerous people in our lives, and we all also are usually being bombarded with people in the media or in different hobby groups we might be a part of, or in different workplaces, schools that we might be taking part in. There are probably people who we would seek to emulate or people who can mentor us across all these areas of life. And these are all areas that we can pull on when we're thinking about identifying role models and mentors. The second is taking the good and leaving the bad. So oftentimes there's this temptation to think about people as maybe all good or all bad, and you have to find this perfect role model or mentor that's going to encapsulate everything about themselves that you seek to emulate. Oftentimes it's more complicated than that, and people might have some qualities that maybe we don't enjoy as much, in addition to having qualities that we do enjoy or seek to emulate or have expertise that they can mentor us about, even if it's not directly applicable always to everything that we want to do. So you can kind of segment and try to take what's good or what you seek to emulate about someone and maybe leave the rest. Although this would come with limits as well. We wouldn't want maybe students to be emulating someone who was maybe mostly bad or had done something egregious, but just trying to come to some idea that there's complexity out there and we don't need to find someone who's perfect in order for them to be a role model. And then third, thinking about what you would like to do to emulate the qualities you appreciate. So while you can identify qualities in role models or qualities in mentors, um, that resonate with you that you want to emulate, it's important to think about what are the action steps that I can really take to put these in place in my own life or for students in their own lives. Two other ideas to share that might help students or you identify mentors or role models is this idea of fragmentoring, excuse me, on the left, and then anti-mentors or tormentors on the right. So some wordplay here. So number one, on fragmentoring, taking different qualities from different people, not just focusing on one person. So this kind of goes along with the idea of taking the good and leaving the bad. You don't have to find just one person who you are putting all your stock in as a role model or a mentor. There can be multiple different people, and maybe you get the idea of empathy from one person and the idea of hard work or perseverance or maybe quality work from someone else. That's totally okay. And you can kind of divide up between different role models, different qualities that you are seeking. And then on the right here, the idea of anti-mentors or tormentors, again, kind of a pun. So oftentimes, we might have people in our lives who are great mentors for us. There's sometimes the idea that there are also people who are not great mentors or people who we see as negative examples. So you can also prompt learners to be thinking about those examples. What is it about someone maybe who you didn't enjoy interacting with or you didn't enjoy as a mentor? What was it that you did not want to be like? And how can you use that in relief in order to think about what do you want to do that's maybe opposed to that? Or what do you want to do differently if you've experienced maybe a more difficult relationship? What would you seek to do differently yourself? So why is this all important? Why is it crucial for us to be thinking, especially for adolescents, but also for adults, about role models and mentors? Number one, it can influence our actions. So we might act differently in the world if we have positive traits that we're seeking to emulate from others. That can push us in different directions. So that relates to this last bullet here as well. It might support us in making more ethical leadership decisions. If we're in positions of authority, when we know that all of our decisions have the power to have an influence on other people, as we saw in our responsibility video, we might make ethical decisions that consider others if we are emulating people who also make those decisions. And then it's also connected to these ideas of motivation, purpose, achieving goals, and even our mental health. So if we have people around us who we feel like we can emulate, we feel like we see positive associations with, and then we can put that into practice in our own life. There are certain positive associations with that we've seen from the research. So it might connect to a sense of greater motivation. If you can see somebody else has achieved something that you want to achieve, it might push you to achieve it more. It can lead to the development of a sense of purpose as well. So maybe if you see someone else who's particularly goal-oriented, for something that you want to do, you can also integrate that into your own sense of purpose. And that leads to achieving your goals. And then with health, I think it relates to often mental health and well-being. So seeing positive mentors and role models, having positive mentor relationships as well around us personally can better get us to a place of well-being. So this is an activity that we've designed in order to have you further think about the ideas of mentors and role models in your own life. And this is a place where you can pause the video to think about one or more of these prompts, or if you're with others, to have a discussion about one or more of these prompts in small groups. So this is called a 3-2-1 activity. So I'm going to just read out these prompts. So think of 3 qualities or attributes that you have valued in a role model or mentor. In your own experience, what are those attributes or qualities if you were to name or list 3 of them? For 2, think of 2 times that you have made a decision differently based on a role model or mentor. How in your own life maybe has a role model or mentor pushed you to do things differently? And then 1 thing that a mentor or role model has said that you have remembered, maybe to you personally, or it could be 1 quote from someone who you consider a role model as a public figure, maybe someone you've never interacted with, but something that you feel encapsulates a way that you try to live your life. So take a moment to think through these 3-2-1 discussion prompts or thinking prompts, reflection prompts, and then you can come back once you are ready. So once you're ready to move on, we wanted to talk as well about some recent data that we ourselves on the Good Project have looked at related to mentoring and role modeling, how students talk about people who could be considered role models in their lives. And how does this compare with how adults might talk about it? So we looked at student work, and we compared it to how adults described ethical leaders. So we know from the research, this research from Arthur et al. In 2019, these are particular qualities that adults often mention when they think about what ethical leaders are. So you can see honesty and judgment popping out here, maybe at the top. Fairness is also fairly high, and teamwork. And then from last year's data, we looked at student work from 12 schools in 10 countries that represented 27 teachers who submitted an activity in which students talked about who they identified as role models or visions, paragons of good work. And we looked at that represented 594 documents and about 300 students. It wasn't always entirely clear if we had exactly unique documents, but it was around 300 students. How did students describe their good work role models by comparison? So oftentimes students were talking about family. That was the category that came out most when we looked at how students were grouping these role models. So often it was family. It could have been also a celebrity. So actually a lot of students described figures like Elon Musk. You can have your own opinions about whether that's a good role model or a bad one, but a lot of students did actually pick him out. And then fictional characters. So for example, someone like Harry Potter, a lot of students identified. For family, it was a lot of things like my parents, maybe a mother, a father, an aunt, an uncle, and these categories were not mutually exclusive. So for example, when students described a family member, it could have been someone who was an academic or someone who was a business person, and they spoke about what it was that they emulated about that person. What were the top attributes that came through from students' descriptions? You can see here in order of most to least mentioned, and these are the characteristics that came up more than 1% of the time. Students most often talked about these good work role models as being hardworking, dedicated, and tenacious. And those three top most mentioned qualities, those are performance character strengths. So we've also grouped the dimensions here by whether they kind of map onto intellectual, moral, or performance character, these three dimensions of character strengths that are often referenced in the literature. And you can see that students really mentioned certain aspects of all three of these. So intellectual character, maybe feeling smart or desire to improve, feeling goal-oriented. Moral character, oftentimes these maybe more interpersonal or ethical character strengths, so caring, selfless, honest, and then performance being related to self-regulation. So it's interesting to note here that maybe the way that students were describing these also didn't necessarily match with that first graph of how adults tended to describe their ethical leader visions. So some takeaways from this research so far, and we're still exploring this data and we'll do more with it. But first, we can see that students draw on both close or proximal, so family member role models, and then also distant, so celebrity role models as well, or people who are not personally known to them. Qualities of role models cross intellectual performance and moral character strengths, as I mentioned. So there are a lot of different character strengths that students are identifying. There are similar qualities of role models described by both adolescents and adults. So even though, as I mentioned on the previous slide, maybe it's not the same order or it's a little bit different, the features kind of show up in similar ways. So students aren't mentioning something totally dissimilar from what adults are talking about. And then finally, something interesting we noted was that in some of the research about what characteristics are important for the future of work, things like technological skill, problem solving, communication across difference, these have been identified as really important qualities for the future of work by large consulting organizations or businesses. And we don't see students talking about these things as much. So we want to think through why for the future of work, maybe is there this difference between how students are thinking about what workers are important to them and who they seek to emulate and what's going on in the field of work. And maybe it's that students need to be better prepared to be thinking about what qualities are important for the future of work as identified out in the field by a lot of businesses or organizations, or maybe it's that organizations and businesses on the flip side need to be prepared to better be thinking about what actually their future workforce is going to care about, and what young people care about today needs to be integrated into organizations. So something to think about there. I think we definitely want to be exploring that topic more. This, again, is a moment for you to pause and think or discuss with others if you are with others. Some implications for practice from all of this of role models and mentors and the data that we've shared. What exercises or routines would you like to start in your classroom related to mentoring or role models that maybe you're not doing? Or alternatively, what are you already doing in your classroom related to this topic that you'd like to share with others? So take a moment here to pause and either write down some thoughts or discuss. And as a wrap-up routine, once you've finished that, this is a Project Zero thinking routine, a fun way to end. So color, symbol, image, it's called. After this discussion of mentors and role models, what is one color, symbol, or image that you have in your mind following this discussion, and why? So maybe a way to synthesize your learning or come up with maybe something more visual that might represent what you've taken away from this session. Thank you so much for joining me, and hope you have learned something today about mentors and role models. Please feel free to share your thoughts with us, and look forward to seeing you next time.